Um, 4 years ago, 2019, just before the pandemic, I had a stroke. I had 2 holes in my heart, and a blood clot went through to my brain and put me on my ass for a long, long time. And it was actually just before we went into the pandemic, I'd sort of made my recovery and come back, and was sort of what I thought was normal, and back to normal, but I really wasn't. Even today, I'm still not back to normal. But yeah, so that was sort of the massive life change of having a stroke, and then the sort of the not consequences, but it was the having to deal with a stroke. And I say that and kind of umming and ahhing how to say it is I worked for a company that didn't give us healthcare in America. So when I had the stroke and the doctor was like, this is going to cost you about $300,000, I was just like, oh, I don't have that money. Like, what are we going to do? I was obviously very lucky that I was still paying tax in the UK. So I was able to come back to England and get the sort of stroke, the holes in my heart fixed, and the rehabilitation I needed. But yeah, so I was very fortunate in one sense, but yeah, it was tough on another side that, a lot of fitness companies are not offering their employees or instructors healthcare, which is crazy. And at a young age, again, I was like 29, 30, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be spending $1,000 on healthcare. I'm 30 years old. I'm in fitness. I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I feel great. Like, why am I spending this money? We'll get healthcare down the line. Like, we don't need it right now. And then, of course, that's when it strikes. So yeah, it was a double-edged sword of having to navigate having a stroke in America, and then finally getting that help back in England that I needed to sort of get things fixed. But it isn't just fixing the hole. That's the crazy thing is I was like, oh, once my holes in my heart are fixed, that's it. I'll be good to go and back out there. And it's been a learning process every step of the way. And even now, 4 years in, I'm still learning about myself, my disabilities, my issues that I have that have come up, that I have to now sort of navigate the world in a completely different way to sort of I used to sort of just getting up, doing what I want to do. Now it's a lot harder, but I'm very fortunate to be here. I'm very fortunate to be still walking around. I was in hospital with people that lost complete mobility, had completely lost the way they spoke. You see, it depends where the stroke hit, the blood clot hits your brain, of what happens. So in some senses, I'm very, very fortunate. And then in other senses, I'm not. And sometimes, like you said, is just because I'm sat on a bike, and I've started to talk about it a little bit more. But it was a tough scenario, because I told Peloton, that was the thing is, you get hired by a fitness company, and then I sat there and I was like, it actually wasn't me, is my wife was the one who was like, you have to tell them that you've had a stroke. You just can't, like lie to them. You can't sort of like hide this. You'll be able to hide it for a while, and then they're going to start being like, what's wrong with him? What's going on here? Like all these issues, like, you can only hide that for so long. And then that's a scary thing, right? Is you got this big opportunity, you got this big job, and then you have to say, but guys, I've had a stroke. I'm pretty much back to normal. I look at myself now as being 90 to 95% back to normal, but there are bits missing that I will never get back. But I think I can do the job. And they turned around, and I literally, once I told them, they were like, okay, let us discuss this. And obviously I think they want to do their due diligence of what it means for them. And they came back and they were like, they still wanted to hire me, which is a huge, a huge thing. Because they could have easily just been like, hell no, like we can't take the risk, or all that sort of worry of what someone's going to think. Um, they could have said anything. So I was very fortunate that they took me on, and they've helped me out when I've had an issue. They've helped make me, for example, I struggle with mornings. And they've been accommodating in helping push my call times a little later, and stuff like that. So if there is ever an issue, I know that I can be open and honest, and I know that I'm actually getting listened to, and that is refreshing from a company standpoint. I
Yeah.
haven't heard it anywhere else, especially for a fitness company.
Yeah.
Is even more. It sounds crazy when you think the fitness company have just hired a guy who's had a stroke. Um, it's insanity, but it's worked out, and that's why I'm unbelievably grateful.
Well, just being a fly on the wall and listening to your story, first of all, is your wife's name Sophia? Is that correct?
Yes,
All right,
yeah,
Sophia, she's a rock star in and of
she
herself.
is.
So she is a boss. Thank you to all the wives that get us to tell
Yeah,
the truth and be forthcoming. So our wives and our spouses are the ones that Bradley, you should probably say something, especially going
yeah,
into a pretty prolific health position where your heart
yeah,
probably is important. That's probably a
yeah.
detail you don't want to overpass. So kudos to you, Sophia, for being there. But even thinking about just what you went through in health. A lot of our listeners tend to be in their 30s and 40s. We got people from singles kind of discovering themselves to married couples to young parents with kids, and healthcare is a huge part of that. And there are a lot of young people. There's not always necessarily a blueprint for all of us as to how to do certain things. So
Mm,
in your case, you were, I believe, a fitness instructor in New York City teaching boxing at the time, from what I've gathered. And the assumption is you were probably in the peak position of your life, that the thought is you're doing so many preventative things now with your body to prevent the unforeseen coming. But that's one of the consequences of life, is there's things that we can never plan for that can cause disruptions or cause all of us to face crisis moments. And there's probably listeners today who have gone through a health condition that was never on the radar in their life,
mm.
and it has rocked themselves, rocked their marriage, rocked their family. So I believe you were married at the time or with Sophia, but do you want to, what was that process like for you, going from somebody that was so healthy to kind of just the onset in what were the things that you just had to work through or experience that you could have never planned for?
Well, yeah. Once again, a massive shout out to my wife. The way that she's, in all honesty, dealt with me. Because it was dark. It was really dark times at the beginning of having the stroke, and I can only imagine that I was just an absolute fucking nightmare to live with. Um, but the thing is, I don't remember a lot of it. Um, you know, she always brings up one story of just how simple, like my brain wasn't quite working, and it's just like the way I'd forget things, and then just have these huge outbursts of sort of emotion and anger and like confusion, and it was really tough. And for someone to sort of stand by me and be there every step of the way has just been honestly amazing. And whilst she's also taken the at that time the brunt of, obviously I didn't have my salary coming in, so she was working full time trying to keep that afloat, trying to keep our apartment in New York sort of paid off, and bills and stuff like that. So she had a lot going on. So yeah, she's honestly the rock to me, really. So I'm so thankful to her, and I could only imagine a lot of other people sort of just walking away and getting rid of me, because yeah, if of what I imagine, if how much I was a nightmare, I could only imagine it being a billion times worse. So I don't know if that answered the question, and I've forgotten what
Yeah,
else you said.
no, I mean that's a part of it. We always think that being a full-time care provider is for our aging parents or a
Yes.
grandparent or somebody who's towards the end of their life. And, but sometimes people are thrust into, you get married, you say your vows to the love of your life, that you'll be there through sickness and in
Mm.
health. And no one is ever, there's no calendar that says, in 5, 6 years, you're going to be rocked with a stroke or a sickness that is going
Yeah.
to change who you are as a person. You didn't want to change, you didn't ask to change, but it's the reality of your situation
Mm.
that you went through a really big health effect. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of spouses that are just silent heroes behind the scenes where they
100%.
are trying to carry the load of keeping things afloat. And the big thing I would say to any listener that's out there today, if you, like Sophia, kind of found yourself in a position where the love of your life has gone through a health concern, just recognize that you probably need some care or some help too. You probably need somebody that you can reach out to and confide in that can build you up. Because while you are trying to pick up the pieces and make sense of the fact that, you are going through something and what in the world is going on and like, how are we going to get through this? She was probably feeling the effects of it on herself. And what I have experienced in my day-to-day life and my job is that when you are thrust into the position of being a caregiver, whether it's for an aging parent or literally your spouse or a child with special needs or whatever it may be, the most care that's probably needed is for yourself, because you can't give out what you're not being filled up with. And so
Yeah.
for the listeners that are out there today, if you find yourself in that position, hopefully Bradley's story can resonate that it's not the end of the story.